the last weather windows may be opening a little bit, and some thoughts on yesterday's post and the comments we received. This is Ben Ayers. It's May 26th. So up on Mount Everest, on the south side, what we're seeing is that everybody's pushing for their last shot at the summit for the year. Kristen Harila, according to her GPS tracker, has made it up to Camp 3. Angrita in the Indian Army expeditions also heading up the mountain. Everybody's getting ready for this fabled weather window tomorrow, the 27th. Let's see what happens. Let's hope that we get one last sort of moment of good weather for the teams to ascend. I got a message from Adrian Ballinger on the north side. He said that his clients have all moved up to Camp 2 and are in position. I'm assuming that by now they've made some progress towards Camp 3 and are also getting ready to head up towards the summit. That's exciting. But that's about it for the news on the mountain right now. What I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today was our post yesterday about the heroics of the Sherpa climbers who are rescuing people on the mountain, are keeping it safe, and are really achieving superhuman feats to keep their clients healthy and get them down alive. This solicited a ton of comments and a ton of feedback, which we really appreciated. And this kind of gets to the core of what Everest climbing is right now. There's a ton of comments as to like, why isn't there some sort of contract signed where the client has to do what the Sherpa tells them? Why doesn't the Nepal government put some regulations in place so that these kind of things don't happen? And all of this kind of begs a point that I think is really important that we didn't really emphasize yesterday, but it is as strong as and as incredible as these Sherpas are on the mountain, glorifying the rescues, which is deserved and needs to be done, it also kind of normalizes the state of affairs on the mountain. The big question is, what can be done so that the Sherpas don't have to do these kind of rescues? How can we create Mount Everest? How can we create an industry on the mountain that doesn't require people to risk their lives as a part of their daily work? How does that happen, and why hasn't it happened? This is like the fundamental question that comes up whenever we look at any of these management issues, sustainability issues on Everest. Everest is such an iconic resource. It's such a singular resource. It's such an important mountain environment. Why isn't it being managed better? That question, my friends, we are probably going to spend the next 2 years trying to unpack together. The big obvious place to start is the government of Nepal. Everest, at least the south half of it, is Nepal's resource. It's something the country is very proud of, something that the country is well known for. Why hasn't the government done more to create a sustainable, to create a safe working environment and climbing environment on the mountain? That's a slippery slope. It's also one that I am a little hesitant to tread heavily upon because I'm just a journalist. I can present objective facts. I can look at why these things are what they are, but I'm not a legislator. I'm not a Nepali, and this isn't necessarily my jurisdiction. However, to dive into it, I reached out today to a member of parliament named Rajendra Bajgain. Rajendra has been a member of parliament for a number of years. He represents the Gorkha district, but he has always been outspoken on mountaineering issues. So I posed this question to him. I asked him, why haven't things been more sustainably dealt with? And he responded to me in text. So I'll read you what he wrote to me. He said, so why hasn't the government of Nepal acted more strictly around Everest? In my view, it's a mix of economic dependency and misplaced priorities. There's a fear that stricter regulations might reduce short-term revenue from tourism, but this is short-sighted. Without a sustainable approach, we will degrade the very asset we are trying to profit from. So this is in line with many of the comments that we've seen and many of the ways that we on the outside looking in at Nepal see it. It's important to take a conservative long-term approach, but unfortunately in Nepal, legislation, in even enforcement of rules, tends to favor the short-term profit over the long-term sustainability. Another factor that's important to remember is that in Nepal, while Mount Everest is a matter of national pride, while it's a really important asset for the country, it is not the main economic driver here. Nepal gets over 30%, almost 40% of its GDP from remittance money, which are young Nepali men and women who travel abroad. They're working in places like Qatar, Malaysia, Turkey, Australia, America, almost any country in the world you go to, you can find Nepalis working really hard and sending money back into their country. That is actually what keeps the economy here afloat. The amount of money that comes in from remittance in a day or in a month dwarfs the amount of money that comes into Everest in a year. So the priorities for the legislature are not necessarily economically tied to Everest. It's important, it's shiny, it's a flashy thing, but it's not first priority. There are other questions also, let's look at this from sort of a demand side, right? There's another issue too where clients now, given sort of how Everest is marketed and looked at, we also see people who come to Everest and they're sort of looking to buy their way to the top. Gone are the days where the majority of people on Everest are sort of professional or extremely passionate mountaineers that do a 5,000 meter peak, a 6,000 meter peak, a 7,000 meter peak. We live in a time of convenience. I live in a time where we're putting a bunch of stuff out on TikTok that, you know, it's in a 1 minute, 2 minute soundbite. We live in a time where people want to come, they want to do a thing, and they want to get on with their lives. And Everest is one of those kind of trophies that now you can get, as we've seen this season. You can get it in a week. You can get it in 4 days from JFK if you train hard enough and you prepare in the right day. Our world, our humanity is moving towards shorter, faster, you know, more sort of flashy ways of accomplishing these things. The slow and the paced out and the Zen way of approaching climbing mountains, or even, you know, making dinner, is changing so quickly. And I think that Everest is a much part of this bigger trend. You're seeing more and more climbers that want to buy an experience, they want to buy a summit, and they're less patient and tolerant to go with the rhythm of the mountain, to listen to the rhythm of their bodies, to understand that maybe it's time to turn around and come back again next year. So then the last point is sort of, where do the Sherpas fit into all this, right? And there were some questions around, like, do Sherpas have a choice of what clients they go with? Do Sherpas have a call in when clients get to turn around? And it's important to understand that when we use the term Sherpa, first of all, that we're using it in the sense of a high altitude worker, not the ethnic group, of course. But we're also looking at, there's like a hierarchy. There are tiers of Sherpas, there are tiers of experience, there are tiers of agency, there are tiers of language proficiency within the Sherpa workforce. So each expedition company sort of matches up their workforce with their clients based upon a bunch of different factors. Sherpas themselves don't get to, like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo and pick the client that they want to go with that's going to be the safest. They are assigned it. That is how it works. And typically you want to have 2 or 3 Sherpas with each client so that the decisions that are made can be reinforced, and that also the rescues, if they happen, can have more manpower. But what happens is a lot of the Sherpas on the mountains don't have very proficient foreign language skills. They can't necessarily speak the language of their clients. A lot of times people who have a good education in Nepal, they pursue other work because it pays better and it's less dangerous, right? So Sherpas themselves are at a sort of a structural disadvantage. And it's not common for for expedition companies to say to their clients, you have to turn around when the Sherpa says you have to turn around. It's a client-focused business. They want the clients to be happy. And most people just assume that the conditions on the mountain are naturally going to filter out the inexperienced and the incapable clients. That does happen to a large extent, but there's still a number that push through up into the high altitude zone and into the death zone and creates the rescues that we see. So that's a huge word salad today. I just want to kind of try to give some context as to the fact that Everest isn't managed better, isn't as simple as having an idea. It involves the way Nepali politics work and don't work. It involves some of the structural issues between the paying clients and the earning Sherpas, and how that creates a sort of a form of voicelessness. It also just kind of has to do with this avalanche of clients that are coming onto the mountain with less experience, and companies are loath to turn these people away. The bigger companies feel that if they turn these clients away, then they're going to go with a different provider that may not have as robust safety systems, that may not be able to implement the rescues, and then we're going to see more deaths. It's all kind of this mix that, again, to me, really reflects a lot of things in our society. It really reflects how so many industries are moving away from having regulated, skilled, sort of measured labor do the labor work and are outsourcing that. A lot of that is getting outsourced to things like drones and AI. That's happening on Everest too. So when we look at Everest, we have to understand that what's happening there is not just a pointed issue that's unique to Nepal. The issues and the challenges that Everest are facing are the issues and the challenges that we are facing as a species in many, many, many of our industries in our world. And the changes and the challenges are complex. I hope that for people watching this, people who are Everest aspirational, that you can understand these complexities and you understand that ultimately, as a climber, your responsibility is to know when you need to turn around and to be conservative about that, to leave the summit for another day if you, or even if your Sherpa isn't feeling good, right? I hope that the trekking agencies and everybody is watching this are thinking about ways that within their own companies and within their own protocols, they can reduce the amount of rescues that we are seeing of these situations. You can set minimum times between camps and enforce those within your expedition company. I hope that Mr. Rajendra Sir or any Nepali decision makers that are watching this, I hope you don't mind that I'm pontificating on what should be. But I do hope and I do think that Nepal should pass the legislation around the 7,000 meter experience being a requirement. This has to pass both houses. It is not a law, but even something like that would make a huge difference. And it would also create a training ground. If there's a lot more climbing on 7,000 meter peaks, a lot of these high altitude Sherpas and high altitude workers will have better places to hone their skills and their client skills, including their ability to stand up for when they know it's time for the client to turn around to avoid a rescue. That's your Everest Daily Rant for May 26th. We'll catch you tomorrow and hopefully have some good news about summits then.